Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm John Coleman. I am a 17-year veteran of the Eternal Faculty Wars. I have been teaching psychology here for 17 years. I am also the residential undergraduate student advisor for psychology and counseling.
Yes, and I am Serena. My introduction is not as long as
So yours is not really necessary because they know who you are.
Okay, so my first question for you is there a time when you felt that your assignments weren't getting the job done? If so, how did you fix that problem?
I'll tell you exactly when that was, and that was when we were interrupted by COVID. And everybody had to go home, and I was teaching two types of classes at that time. I was teaching traditional psych major students here on campus, and I was teaching an online dual credit class from Pine Tree. For whatever reason, and I wasn't real sure for a long time what that reason was, I was not breaking through the dual credit barrier. I mean, when I was going out there twice a week, it was just a pretty normal introduction to psych class. When we all had to go home and do everything online, they didn't. And of course, I wouldn't be naming names or anything anyway, but they just didn't. They did not come to our Zoom or team meetings. They did not turn assignments in on time. And it seemed like they weren't getting it, the material. Not like they were getting it before the pandemic.
They're just doing the assignments just to do them.
And they weren't even doing those on time. I mean, it was almost like anything goes. But when they did turn them in, I just didn't feel like they were getting the material that they needed. I'm not real sure that I solved the problem to my satisfaction. I did have to go through some higher channels to get their attention. One thing I did do that seemed to help was I asked them, how would you like for me to present this class? You're in high school. We were doing it in class before, and everything was pretty much the same as it is out here. I'm not sure what's different just because you had to go home. Maybe something is. How would you like for me to make this, and this is going to be the key phrase right here, how would you like for me to make this a more student-centered class as opposed to a teacher-centered class? Now, what made this different than the way I approach some other classes is I actually asked them that question. Then I had to explain to them what it was I was asking, because there's no way that they knew what student-centered versus teacher-centered was. But when I explained that I was asking them to pretty much design the class, not the material, but the class, then it got better. Some of their performance in terms of showing up for the meetings and turning their assignments in on time, despite the threat of bad grades and zeros and other things, some of that did not get noticeably better, but their understanding of the material did. So when it was all said and done, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. But for a while there, I was just absolutely, I had no clue what I needed to do next. Because that has never happened to the majority of teachers. They've never had to go through a complete gear shift like we did with COVID.
That was crazy. I was in a speech class during that.
How do you do speech? You know, it's like, we're going online. You're going, really?
I'm like, this is great. I don't have to speak in front of people. I'm just recording myself speaking.
Which defeats the purpose of a speech.
Exactly, yeah.
I got you.
So the next question is there is a big shift in the amount of nurture most students experience when they go from high school to college. Do you think that decreasing this nurture has a positive or negative effect on the students?
It should have a positive effect because it should be part of their growth and development, not only as students but as people.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't learn to adapt to new environments, new circumstances, new expectations, we're going to get left behind as individuals in a world that doesn't stop for us. And number two is we don't ever mature.
Right.
You know, I ask my students in my human growth and development class here on campus, from time to time, I'll say, how many of you wish that today you were exactly the same person you were 10 years ago when you were 8 and 9 years old? Nobody. How many of you wish you were the way you were 5 years ago? Nobody. How many of you would like to be exactly the way you are today 10 years from now? Nobody. If you're here, if you're in education, number one, you know that you are wanting to move on, move up and move on. I did a workshop here one time to homeschool students on changing the mindset from homeschool to college.
Right.
It's the same thing. You change the mindset from high school to college. You change your mindset from community college to senior college. If you don't, chances are real good you're going to struggle and might not even make it. So it's important. More so than the nature part of the nature nurture algorithm is the nurture part. Because once you get to this age, it's all nurture.
Mm-hmm.
It's all nurture.
Yes, sir. How do you encourage your students to balance growing in their faith with their cognitive development throughout your classes?
Well, fortunately, and I say that most sincerely, as faculty members, we are expected to do that
Right.
as part of our job.
Mm-hmm.
We sign a statement of faith when we apply here that includes an understanding that we will integrate faith into our teaching. The way I do it is on the days that I teach that we don't have chapel, I do a short devotional,
Mm-hmm.
real short, with a point that is relevant to their role as students, y'all's role as students. And in my lectures, I will often tailor a point so that they see that there's a faith element to it. For example, the other day in class we were talking about relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you know, the gold standard for relationships is unconditional love. I love you and nothing you can do will make me love you more. Nothing you can do will make me love you less. I love you without strings attached. I said, now as human beings, we have a tough time with that. But God does love us unconditionally. Now, there are conditions under which He expects us to live out that love. There are boundaries and guidelines, and Scripture tells us what is good for us and what's not good for us. But His love for us has no conditions. And I'll do that as often as I can without making it sound like a religion class. Yeah.
And to kind of follow with that question, since you brought up that you did the daily devotionals, why do you think the school encourages this engagement? Do you think it helps reinforce learn to read the Bible?
You would hope.
Yeah.
You would hope. I can't get over the fact that a lot of students don't even bring a textbook to class, let alone a Bible. But then in church, I can look out there from where I sit and I don't see a handful of Bibles.
It's all on the phones.
It's
now.
all on the phones, tablets, and screens for
Mhm.
churches that have screens. Ours doesn't. And to me, that's a lot like asking a carpenter to come to a construction site without a hammer. You don't have your main tools.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, that does not mean they're not looking up things at home or when they get out of class. I hope they are. But the reinforcement is more probably here and here than it is there. So, yeah.
So, James Marcia has described 4 identity statuses that have been identified through interviews with adolescents, which are foreclosure, identity diffusion, martyrdom, and identity achievement. Have you had any experiences or conversations with students that found themselves stuck in an identity crisis?
You bet.
I do
Every day.
assume that this is with students that may not declare a major, and I feel like you might have more experience with this with the position you hold.
Can you stop that real quick?
Yeah.
I need to get. I see probably at least 3 of those 4 often.
Mm-hmm.
Moratorium is one that I encounter a lot. It's kind of the old thing about they don't want to make a decision, but in not making a decision, they've actually made a decision.
Right.
Other times it's just confusion. First, honestly, this age group, your age group, and a little younger,
Mm-hmm.
still, in a lot of ways, don't know who they are. They're still trying to figure out how they feel about themselves gender-wise, how they feel about themselves ethnic-wise, how they feel about themselves politically, religiously, socioeconomically, educationally. What do they want to be when they grow up?
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of identity to get a grip on. And honestly, I know some adults not too far off of my own age who still struggle with who they are.
Yeah. But
if a student will ask themselves the question, not just who am I, but who do I want to be, it gets the conversation started. But I can assure you that a college student, and probably even more so a high school student,
Mm-hmm.
so either secondary education or post-secondary education, there are so many things they've got to come down on. I am a white heterosexual male, born in this country, born in Texas, and lived in Texas pretty much all my life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's my identity. Now, in that identity also comes some different roles we play in life: father, husband, I'm not a husband, but father, grandfather, brother, friend, church leader, faculty member. I mean, when you look at all the things we have to come to grips with in terms of who we are, and then throw in Abraham Maslow, who says, way up here at the top of the pyramid, when you have reached your full potential, oh yeah, wait, there's a little bit more, and we call that transcendence now. Part of what I talk to students about is, how can you be the best version of you that God created you to be? First, you've got to come to grips with, you didn't have any say-so in that you were born, when you were born, or who you were born to. None. It didn't consult you.
Right.
So you wake up one day and go, and these are my parents? You've got to make a decision. Am I going to be happy with that or not? I am Hispanic. Am I going to be happy with that or not? I am black. Am I going to be happy with that or not? I am female. Am I happy with that or not? Some people aren't these days.
Right.
So what we see a lot of at this age is identity confusion before we even get to like moratorium, where they finally just decide, forget this. I'm just going to be me.
Right.
Well, okay, great. Who are you?
Yeah.
So yeah, I see all of those in one form or another.
I can
see
imagine.
all of those. And I am not surprised. I do not judge, because I just know it's a normal part of having to get from. Now, and I'm going to presume that you probably already know something about emerging adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
And this idea that back in the day, you got out of high school at 18 and you immediately either went to college, went into the service, or got a job. That was about it. Now, because the 18 to 26ers, 25ers, 26ers are delaying going to college, or delaying getting out of college, staying at home longer, not marrying until later, if at all, not starting a family till later, if at all, not going into their chosen career, if at all, so there's this extended period of, and listen to what I'm saying, there's an extended period of no identity definition. we are delaying identity definement another 6-7 years, which makes going into adulthood at 25 or 26 actually what it used to be to go from 18 into 19 and 20.
Do you think that has like a more positive or negative effect?
Well,
As going into adulthood, I guess.
I think it would be more of a negative effect.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say that is because when I watch traditional struggling going on, I mean, just from the time you're a sophomore in high school until you get out of college, just that traditional struggles that goes on between who am I, what's my purpose, what's God's will for my life, what am I supposed to be doing, I want to do this, but can I do that, and all that y'all go through, and that I went through at that time. If it doesn't get nailed down, semi-nailed down pretty quickly, people going into adulthood still not sure of who they are. Well, if you're not sure of who you are, this is profound. You can write this down. If you're not sure of who you are, it's going to be tougher for you to be sure of who anybody else is.
Yeah, I think that's.
So I think it's a negative effect overall.
Yeah.
I think we need, as educators, to the extent that we can, spend as much time helping. Now it's going to be from 16 to 26. Really go through the exercises and the things they need to do to discover more about who they are. Because now they've got longer to do it, and most people will not willingly do that. So I think it's a little bit of a negative.
Is there any training that you, as a professor in a university that attracts international students, undergo in order to prepare for the different cultures in your classroom?
Not that I know of. If you're talking about specific things that they can do, we have orientation. We even have a thing for faculty members. It's one of the new buzzwords in the last 2 or 3 years: inboarding or onboarding, which is, it's just a way of saying, we know you're new to this country, we know you're new to this culture. Here's some things that will help you move down the road.
Yeah.
I wish, in fact, I had a conversation with Dr. Schaefer, who is my dean and department chair, just today about diversity and diversity training. I get a lot of questions from people in the public. What do y'all do about diversity? Are y'all recruiting Hispanic students, African American students, students from Asia, international students? And I say, we're real big on international students. But do we have things in place for them? We do, but it's mostly part of the normal, regular activities that we offer new students.
Right, I know the diversity part is still slowly coming together here at LeTourneau, because I am part of the multicultural ambassador, and I know that's a new sector. And I know that there's like a diversity team here on campus, so I was just wondering if maybe there was other.
I think
there's something onboarding.
The task force is what I call it. That's looking at that. I understand just barely that they are aware that there's a need for that, and so my hope and my prayer is that they will make sure that some things get into place that will help international students and other minority, based population groups actively become acclimated to this culture. And not just the American culture, not just the Western culture, but the Christian culture and the university culture. Because there's going to be life after LeTourneau that they need to be able to acclimate to as well.
So, what are some methods of reinforcement that are commonly used within a college environment? Do you use any of these methods within your own syllabus?
Sure. I am very big on encouraging and supporting. and affirming. Okay, now, not falsely, not just walking by and patting somebody on the shoulder and going, good boy, but really honestly saying, I know you've been struggling in this class for a while, but it looks like you may have turned the corner and are headed the other direction. If there's anything that I can do to help you keep going on that path, let me know.
It's like a progress report, like at least know that you're paying attention, that I'm trying hard.
Yeah, I want them to know that their work is being noticed, right? The other thing too is, in the course of my lectures and in the course of the time we have before class, when I'm just talking to them, I will give them things to think about and even to do that reinforce good learning and being a good citizen. For example, the other day I told everybody stop what they were doing, just stop, just listen to me for a minute. And I said, I want you to learn this, not because it's going to be on the next test, but because you need to know this in life. I said, so write this down. That which you allow will continue. Now, those who've had intro know that in chapter 6, when we talk about operant conditioning, we talk about positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, punishment, all that stuff. That which you allow will continue. And then I follow it up by saying, here's my point. You teach people how to treat you. If you continue to let them disrespect you, they'll keep on disrespecting you. Why not? Because you let them. So if you want to be respected or treated with respect, you've got to set some boundaries and some guidelines. What that does in psychology, probably more than any other discipline on campus, in psychology, that reinforces human relationship principles. And what we need in this world more than anything right now is decent communication and the decent treatment of each other. So if it's not already in the textbook, if it's not already on the PowerPoints, if it's not already in the material in some way, then I reinforce it with real life stories and real life experiences. And I've done that. I lost my son in 2020. He died of an accidental drug overdose. He was 32. I don't dwell on that. I don't spend a lot of time talking about that. But every now and then, I can tell a story from Jordan's past that will reinforce a point that not only we're making in class, but that I would want to make to them just as people, human beings. And when we talk about substance abuse, when we even talk about suicide, we talk about, he didn't commit suicide, but I mean, he was around people who did. There are ways from real life experiences that I and other faculty members can pull from that don't serve us, but reinforces a life point for them. And honestly, psychology is absolutely the easiest class in the world to make that happen. It really is.
So, many classes offer SI groups to help support classes. As a psychology student, I have only experienced one SI group out of all of my psychology classes, mostly as an experiment to see if it would help. And this was with the statistical and research methods. From my own personal experience, I would say that I found it extremely helpful, especially when it came to like a long-term memory of trying to remember it. Do you think offering more SI groups for other psychology courses would be helpful in maintaining that long-term?
Yes, and there's nothing I like better than to actually be an active part of that. I'll be perfectly honest with you, I just really haven't had a lot of time to do that.
Right.
If that were offered, or the opportunities could be offered, I would be first one on board. I have seen more instances where more students were helped by that than where it went the other direction or had no effect at all. I told somebody the other day, we kind of started down that road, we didn't go very far. But I said, the worst that could happen is I would be the best I would be the best I am right now. Or your student would be the best they are right now. When I was in college, we had a very rough, loose version of that
Mm-hmm.
that I found helpful. When I got into graduate school, even more so. And in psychology, it's just unnatural.
Right.
So yes, I would say.
I think it would have to take like a different structure than other SI.
It would.
groups
It would. And the thing is, and honestly, I haven't come across anybody at the deans or the board, department chair levels that are opposed to restructuring.
Right.
But
it's the time and
who has the time?
Yeah.
And especially if you're a faculty member here, you're already on 2 or 3 other committees and you're in meetings all the time. And that's something you'd like to see happen, but when are you going to help facilitate it?
Right.
Again, that's the kind of thing that I would like to see more of.
Maybe it could be a project for the next teacher
I'm
assistant,
thinking, what, that would be. There are ways that we could actually begin to make inroads there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just sitting down and saying, let's brainstorm this.
Yeah.
And we just haven't done it.
I'll have to have a conversation about this.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it.
As a college professor, I assume you use direct instruction within your class, considering you need to operate on a schedule in order to get through all the material in a short amount of time. What are some pros and cons that you have experienced with using direct instruction?
There's never enough time.
Yeah, I would assume.
There's always too much material,
Mm-hmm.
and there's never enough time.
Mm-hmm.
Here's 2 things that I've learned over the years. Number 1 is you've got to pick and choose. Now, that does not exempt the students from reading the chapter and studying the other material. But in class, you've got to pick and choose. If there's nothing else they get out of today's teaching, what's the 1 or 2 things they have to know? And you bear down on those.
Right.
The other is, and so let's just go ahead and get into it. Let's get into learning styles for a moment.
Okay.
There are learning styles and there are teaching styles. Some teachers don't do real well in directive teaching. Some students don't do well with directive teaching as a learning style.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in educational psychology, these many years ago, one of the things that I decided I would do in an effort to accommodate students in a class, I mean, if I've got 30 students in a class, I promise you, I have 3 or 4 or 5 different learning styles. I got the visual learners. I've got the ones who love to take notes. I've got the ones who'd rather read about it. The whole nine. Some do well in group discussions. So what I try to do, and I don't get to do it all in one class. You got a 50-minute class, but about every 10 minutes, I know that somebody in my class is going on vacation. They're going to go to Hawaii. Okay, they're going to check out.
Yeah.
Because they're not responding to my particular teaching style at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So what I try to do in a 50-minute class is about every 10 minutes change the teaching approach. So I may be doing direct lecture for the first 10 minutes of class.
Right.
Then I may show a video. Then I may get people into a group discussion about the video.
Mm-hmm.
Then I come back to the lecture. And then it's time to go home. So that's my style.
Yeah.
Is direct lecturing. I mean, that's the way. This is what you need to know. 2 things. I'm just going to tell you 2 things right now. Number 1 is I tell my students, if and when you ever become a parent, you will parent the way you were parented, because that's the only model you know at that point. Mm-hmm. Until you decide later what you want to do. You will parent like you were parented. It's the same way with teaching. You will teach like you were taught.
That makes sense.
And so I grew up in an era where it was almost all lecture. It was all direct teaching. And I responded very well to that. But some students, especially students today who have a little bit shorter attention span, who are used to things being on video and visuals. So I do PowerPoints, I do videos, I do group discussions, and I do direct lecturing. And I try to mix those up a little bit, keeping in mind that they each need to drive home the point for the day, whatever that is. So that's how I handle that.
To kind of go into that next question, what are your views on using technology within your classroom?
I'm totally intimidated by it. I am all for it, provided that the technology doesn't take the center of attention.
Right.
Unfortunately, it does here too often because it doesn't work. So you spend all your time trying to get it to do what it's supposed to do. When it's working, and there are days when it works perfectly, it is an asset and it is a resource. It's a tool for me as a teacher because I can show PowerPoints, I can show a YouTube video, I can, like we did during COVID, we can set it up so that people can come into class from where they're recuperating, if they're sick, whatever the case may be. The learning curve on some of the technology today is very steep. It takes a while.
Yeah.
And I'm not 20 years old anymore. So I don't incorporate a whole bunch of new strange stuff into my technology. But I can't imagine anymore teaching in a classroom that has no technology at all.
Right.
I just see too many advantages. Again, going back to the teaching style, some students learn best by seeing animated videos.
It's like, we know this information, why not use that to our
Exactly.
advantage?
And what I try to get them to do is to say, all right, now we're watching a YouTube video, but you need to take notes anyway, which challenges some students because they want to watch what's up there, but yet they've got to take notes.
Right.
Some students will look at PowerPoints and try to write down every word. I tell them, don't do that. They're on Canvas.
Right.
They're good to go back and review later. Just don't do it. Just watch, because I'm not going to read you, and this is nothing, it just drives me nuts. Are teachers who read word for word what's on the PowerPoint. You don't need the PowerPoint.
Right.
What I would do though is say, for those students who'd rather look at it than hear about it, you look at the PowerPoint, but listen to what I'm saying, because I'm going to be commenting on what you see, and then go back later and look at the PowerPoints that are on Canvas. Technology, I don't know, 80, 40, 50, 35 years ago, let's say, you could take it or leave it in the classroom. Not anymore. It's not an option, and quite frankly, if it's used correctly and with the right intentions, because some professors are like, hey, I want to show off how much I know. I don't want to show off how much I know, because I'll wind up showing off how much I don't know.
Right.
What I want to do is say, if this will help you learn the material, let's go for it. And so I use technology that way.
And I know you've already talked a little bit about that you'd like to incorporate group discussion. This question kind of, I think, asks a little bit of the same question, but could you give an example of a time you wanted your students to learn through cooperative learning? Why did you choose this form of learning?
And again, psychology is kind of a unique class to talk about that in, because everybody in a psychology class, almost without fail, because of where they've been in their life, and here they are, they have a different perspective. The quickest, usually easiest way for them to learn that it's okay to have other ideas and to entertain those ideas is to get in a small group that I have handpicked because of the mixture of not only GPAs, but backgrounds, experiences, athletes with non-athletes, males with females, different ethnic groups, and the idea being that, and the topic being, there's no right or wrong answer here.
Right.
So, what I want you to do is to spend 10 minutes looking at the following angles for this situation. And then I want you to pick somebody from your group. It's going to be somebody who doesn't mind talking out loud. Pick somebody in your group to stand up and tell us what y'all basically talked about and how it ended.
Right.
Because it did not end with everybody agreeing. So how did it end? And what did you learn from it?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you didn't learn anything from it, well, then it was a waste of time.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea is, well, I learned that actually there are some people out there who think this is a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
I've never thought that was a good idea. They thought it was a good idea. And I can see kind of, sort of, why they think that.
Mm-hmm.
So, collaborative, in that sense, is different than a group project, which nobody likes.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's always somebody who tries to kind of just not do the work, but they come in, show up for the presentation and get a good grade.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody likes that. We've taken the steps to make sure that everybody gets to evaluate everybody in the group. That being said, group projects are still probably not, I mean, they were great back in junior high
Mm-hmm.
and middle school and high school. In college, I don't think group projects are the best way to do some things. But if it's the only way in your particular class with your particular demands, then you can get students to collaborate on a single topic or related subject, then yeah, we're going to do group projects.
Yeah.
So my basic reason for having a group discussion is to air different perspectives
Mm-hmm.
and everybody come away understanding that other people have other viewpoints and that that's okay.
Yeah. I believe that Laterno provides a type of cooperative learning when it comes to God. We are a small group out of the population that works together to grow closer in our relationship with God. Do you think it can become a problem to stay in our Christianity bubble that we've kind of formed here on campus?
Yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, because, well, I'll give you an example. And some of our best and brightest students ever come from homeschool environments.
Mm-hmm.
The reason they're in a homeschool environment, in most cases, is because the parents want that bubble.
Right.
Because there is so much outside that bubble that is undesirable, and they want to be sure that the quality education their child gets is not tainted
Mm-hmm.
by what's outside that bubble. Then they come to Laterno, still in that bubble, and we don't open that bubble up a lot because we want to emphasize the role of faith and the role of God in a student's education as well as their worldview. If they don't have some opportunities, and then we provide opportunities, but if they don't have some opportunity, or if they don't take advantage of the opportunities to explore safely,
Mm-hmm.
which we give them that safe environment, what life outside that faith bubble looks like, and then they can decide if that's something that they could live with or not. Then when we turn you guys loose with a degree and you go out there, it may not go easy and it may be awkward and it may be a struggle because the world out there is going to show no mercy.
Right.
If we could keep you here the rest of your life, it would be great. Because then you could stay in that bubble.
Right.
And you would operate just fine. Once we turn you loose, you need to know a little bit more about what you're getting into.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not talking about the horrible, disgusting, depressing stuff that's out there. I'm just talking about regular life.
Daily life
Daily
occurrences
life.
that you're going
Daily
to
life. So it's a very fine line to walk.
Mm-hmm.
Because where does our responsibility as an educational institution start and stop, and where does our responsibility as someone to prepare you for life start and stop?
Mm-hmm.
But I have seen too many people stay in that bubble too long and then crash and burn. Not because they're bad people, they're great people. In fact, they are stellar people because of being in the bubble. But they're not prepared for what awaits them outside that bubble. So we need to do something. And I don't know that we're not doing all we can do right now. I just know that it's important.
Right.
It's important.
What would you say to a student that is having trouble giving themselves praise for their academic achievements?
Well, that's a big problem here.
Really?
It's a big problem here. And the reason is, and if you stop and think about it, I think that you might agree, um, most of the students we have that come here are good students. They have already excelled in some form of their educational life, but they've also been taught all along you don't brag about your accomplishments, you don't toot your own horn, so to speak, you don't talk about yourself a lot because, number one, that's not the Christian way. Number two is to be humble, is to be from a position of gratitude. You need to thank God for your gifts and graces, but you don't need to tell everybody else about them.
Right.
Problem with that is at some point, and a good example is this last Saturday when we had our Heritage Scholarship competition.
Mm-hmm.
You almost have to come in with the idea of talking about your accomplishments, because one of the first questions is, what sets you apart from the other students competing for this scholarship?
Right.
Something must, or you wouldn't be here. Somebody convinced you that there was something, or they wouldn't have encouraged you to apply.
Mm-hmm.
So what is it? And it's really interesting to see that there are two responses. One is they're not real sure how to answer that question, or they've been prepped enough to know to think about it ahead of time, and they have some solid answers. I tell students it's a lot like when you go in for a job interview and they ask you the question, tell us a little bit about yourselves. I hate that question. I think that is absolutely one of the biggest wastes of time that a job interviewer can ask a job candidate. Don't say, tell me about yourself. Okay, I was born in, I can get that online.
Right.
You know, tell me what makes you the unique individual that you are.
Mm-hmm.
So I would ask the question, tell me what you would say are some of your strengths. And I don't use the word weaknesses. Don't tell me about your weaknesses. Tell me about some areas that you need to grow in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, most people can feel comfortable telling you what they're good at without saying, I'm great, but I know that I'm good at math, or I know that I'm good at science, or I know that I'm good at writing, or I know that I'm good at this.
Right.
I need to get better at speaking in public. I really wish I was more proficient at writing serious academic papers, because I'm just struggle with that. Whatever the case may be, what I tell students is there comes a point where what you are good at doing, I mean, you're good at, and you know you're good at doing it. You're a good cook, you're a good softball player, you're a good soccer player, you're a good whatever. What you're good at intersects with what you like to do.
Mm-hmm.
And where those two come together, I call your sweet spot. That's when you start figuring out what your career might look like.
Mm-hmm.
To do that, you've got to know those two things. What are you good at? And what do you like doing? And if you like doing what you're good at, all the better.
Yeah.
All the better. If you don't like what you're good at, then you either need to learn to like it a little bit better, or find something else that you're good at that matches what you like.
Mm-hmm.
We are taught as Christians to be humble. It's just part of our training. It's scriptural, it's taught in church camp, vacation Bible schools, whatever. We're all taught we need to be humble. Paul says all through his writings, do not boast, do not boast, I do not boast, do not boast, unless you're boasting, of God. That's
Right.
the only thing he says you can boast about. There's a difference in being able to talk about your accomplishments and what you're good at and bragging. Nobody wants to hear you brag.
Right.
And you won't last very long in most circles if that's what you do. So I encourage students when they come in here and talk to me, and I said, tell me what some of your strengths are.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of stumble around at first, and I say, tell me what you know you're good at doing. Just tell me. Just make a list. Tell me what are you good at? Not how good you are,
Mm-hmm.
but what you're good at doing. Once they kind of get past that hump,
There you go.
they'll tell you.
Yeah.
They'll tell you.
Yes, sir.
And I
So-
enjoy hearing it.
We are out of time.
Oh man.